शिवे यस्य परा भक्ति त्यागे अपि अति उत्तम अहेतुको कृपा सिंधु शिवानंद नमाम्यहम्. I bow down to Swami Sivananda, whose devotion to Lord Shiva was supreme, who was an exemplar of renunciation, and who showered grace to one and all without any reason or justification. We will reflect on the life and teachings of Swami Sivananda today. As you can see, he was born in 1854, so about 8 years senior to Swami Vivekananda. And of the 16 monastic disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, he was the senior most except for Budo Gopal, Swami Advaitananda. And he lived for about 80 years, so he lived the longest. He was the second president of the order. As we saw last time, Swami Brahmananda left his mortal frame in 1922. So from 1922 to 1934, for about 12 years, he was the president of the order, the second president of the order. And his most distinctive feature was complete loss of ego. You can consider his body to be a chalice where he drained it of all his ego and filled it with Sri Ramakrishna. So he was born in a place called thank you. He was born in a place called Barashot. Barashot is about maybe 25 kilometers from Kolkata. His father was Ram Kanhai Ghoshal and his mother was Vamasundari. Ram Kanhai Ghoshal was a kind of a legal person. He was a pleader in Rani Rashmuni's. He used to manage cases for Rani Rashmuni's, legal situations. And as you know, Rani Rashmani, as we heard from Abhijit last week, Rani Rashmani was the chief patron of the Dakshineshwar temple. So he did visit Dakshineshwar temple often. And we read that he would come to the Dakshineshwar temple. He was a tantric devotee, a devotee of the Divine Mother. So he would come to the Dakshineshwar temple and he would bring with him a Shama Sangeet singer. Shama Sangeet means the songs dedicated to Kali. And he would sit in the Nat Mandir, the picture of which we saw from Abhijit last time. He would sit in the Nat Mandir, meditate for hours on end, with tears flowing down his cheeks, and when people would see him after that, his face would be flushed. So he was a very sincere devotee. And also his mother, Vamasundari, they had a daughter, and then in order to have a son, they prayed to Lord Shiva. And the form of Shiva that they prayed to was the Tarakeshwar Shiva. Tarakeshwar Shiva is considered very Jagrata, very powerful. And the Tarakeshwar Shiva temple is also very close to Dakshineshwar. Holy Mother visited it many times. It's a very well-known temple. So because their wishes were fulfilled and a son was born, he was named Taroknath Ghoshal. So Ram Kanhai Ghoshal, he was a pretty wealthy man, and he was also a big philanthropist, because we read that in Barashot, in this very place actually, at his home, that there was a school, and at his home, he housed, fed, and educated 25 to 30 students. So all these students were paid for by him. So you can imagine, a very generous man. And interestingly, Taroknath grew up kind of as one of those 25 to 30 students. When people would tell Vamasundari, well, you see, after all, Tarok is your son, so he should be a little special than the others. She would say, well, in Bengali, Jini diyechen, tini dekhben. I mean, Lord Shiva has given this to us, and it will be Lord Shiva who will take care of him. So Taroknath went to this local school in Barashot, but very soon, by the time he was in 10th grade, for whatever reason, his father's financial position became much worse. And it became so bad that after 10th grade, Taroknath had to take up a job. So he took up a job in Indian Railways, and that job required him to go to different places in North India. Most of the time he was in these two cities, Ghaziabad and Mughal Sarai. Mughal Sarai is still today, you can consider a big railway town. And that's where basically the two divisions of Indian Railways, the Northern Railway and Eastern Railway, they meet. So he was there. But this boy, or I mean kind of boy, after, even though he was working, his spiritual tendencies became very pronounced, and he was obsessed with samadhi. He would try to read up wherever he could about samadhi. He would try to do whatever he understood it needs to be done to get samadhi. And at around this time, his roommate Prasanna, his roommate tells him that, okay, if you are so obsessed with samadhi, there is a person in the Dakshineshwar Kali temples, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, who has attained samadhi. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa was very popular by then, as we saw last time. So people knew about him and his frequent samadhi episodes. So Prasanna mentioned it to him, and you can see the parallel when we read Swami Vivekananda's biography. It was Hasty who told him pretty much the same thing, that if you are so eager to look for somebody who has seen God, the person whom I recommend, Hasty said that, the person whom I recommend is Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. So same kind of situation. But at the same time, there were a series of personal tragedies that afflicted him. He lost his mother when he was just 9, and that too when his mother gave birth to his sister, who was just a few months old. His elder sister died, his brother-in-law died, so many deaths in the family. And because of this mainly, he decided, or he chose to come back to Kolkata from North India. So he comes back to Calcutta and takes up a job there. And this is when perhaps the biggest tragedy occurred. Now what happened is his younger sister, when she became of an age in those days, when it was considered appropriate age for marriage, it was time to get her married. But as we saw, his father's financial position was not too good. And in the Hindu society of those days, marrying a daughter, you needed a lot of money to pay for dowry and other things, which his father didn't have. So what happened was what is typically called as exchange marriage. Exchange marriage means that his sister was married to the groom, and the groom's sister would be married to Tarok. So Tarok, despite his wishes, he had to marry, and his wife's name was Nityakali. But Tarok by this time was so determined to pursue this spiritual path that he told Nityakali that, see, our marriage is not like this regular ordinary marriage. This is my goal in life. And Nityakali understood, and she supported him fully. So as you saw in the Shivananda Maharaj was also known as Mahapurush Maharaj. Mahapurush in Sanskrit means a great person. And the reason he was called Mahapurush Maharaj, a name given by none other than Swami Vivekananda, was when Vivekananda heard from Shivananda that this was the deal, this was the arrangement, this was his way of tackling this unfortunate situation of getting married, that he did not break his vow of chastity. When Swami Vivekananda heard this, that's when he said, so you are a Mahapurush. And from then on, this name became very popular. So now time has come for, as we saw, Prasanna tells him, he comes back to Calcutta, and he now meets Sri Ramakrishna. The first time he met was in Ramdatta's house, and as you know, Sri Ramakrishna used to come to Calcutta often and meet people at devotees' house, Ramdatta's house being the most prominent among them. So he goes in, Tarok goes in, and what does he find? He finds Sri Ramakrishna in Samadhi. Imagine, he has been reading about this, he wants to attain this state, and the first time he sees Sri Ramakrishna is in Samadhi. And not only that, when Sri Ramakrishna comes down from that plane of Samadhi, he talks about Samadhi, and he talks in such a lucid and clear language that Tarok is heavily impressed, and he then starts visiting Dakshineshwar. So, and it's very interesting, when he goes to Dakshineshwar, he says, Swami Sivanandas says later, that I saw Sri Ramakrishna as my mother. As you heard, he had lost his mother at a very early age. And as we saw in the case of Swami Brahmananda, Swami Brahmananda considered Sri Ramakrishna as his father. In this case, it is the motherhood of Sri Ramakrishna. And disciples of Mahapurush Maharaj have reminisced later that he would say, like, well, if somebody would bring in some fruits or sweets, he would say, offer it to the mother. And everybody understood by mother he meant Sri Ramakrishna. So, so he considers Sri Ramakrishna as his mother, and one day Sri Ramakrishna says that, see, I mean, I don't want to know who are the parents of the people whom I see, but in your case I have this irresistible urge to ask you. And when Tarok told that my father is Ramkanai Ghoshal, he said, oh, Ramkanai, yeah, I know him very well. He's kind of my guru. My guru? He says, yeah, you know what? And we also know from Sri Ramakrishna's biography that after that very intense sadhana, he had this tremendous kind of a burning sensation all over his body. And at that time, Ramkanai, he gave him an amulet. And upon wearing that amulet, Sri Ramakrishna's that burning sensation came down appreciably. So he says, this is, your father is my guru. And then the training starts, but again, the training is very interesting. As we saw again with Swami Brahmananda, Sri Ramakrishna would request him something and Rakhal would flatly refuse. In this case, Sri Ramakrishna doesn't tell anything to Tarok, doesn't ask any service from Tarok. So Tarok is now starting to get nervous. What's going on? Why does he not allow me to serve him? So one day it so happens that Sri Ramakrishna is going to answer nature's call, and he carried this water container with him. And at that time, he needed somebody else to carry because he couldn't touch metal. So he looked for the regular people. He couldn't find any. Then he asks Tarok, could you take this? And Tarok is very happy. And then Sri Ramakrishna says, you know, because your father was my guru, I can't really ask you for these kinds of services. So we have so many interesting episodes of his traineeship under Sri Ramakrishna. Let's just look at a couple. He is now visiting Dakshineshwar pretty regularly. And he kind of, Sri Ramakrishna that is, makes arrangement. He says to Tarok, you stay at Ramdotto's house, but you have to cook for yourself. So, and sometimes you can go to your house. So that's the deal. So he comes to Dakshineshwar. He has decided to stay the night in Dakshineshwar in Sri Ramakrishna's room. And after a late supper or dinner, it's kind of time close to midnight, you can say, or a little before midnight. And Tarok is just ready to fall asleep when Sri Ramakrishna says, hey, are you asleep? He says, no, sir, He says, oh, this is perfect time. See, this is so quiet. Let us do Ram Nam. So they start doing Ram Nam. And it goes on and on. And what do they realize? That the morning dawn has come. So the whole night they spend doing Ram Nam. Then Tarok reminisces that he, again, now, as with every perhaps disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, they start badgering him. Sir, give us some spiritual experiences. So once it so happens that Sri Ramakrishna just touches Tarok. And what Tarok says is, the touch made me lose outer consciousness. I realized I was the Atman, eternal and free, and the Master was the Lord born as man for the good of humanity. And we know from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15, 7th verse, Mamaiva angsha jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana, where Shri Krishna says, a part of myself, which although really is eternal, has become the jiva in the realm of embodied things. So we find such clear examples of these kinds of teachings. So there are other spiritual experiences as well. We will move ahead, except for to say that when Roma Rolla decided to write this biography of Sri Ramakrishna, Roma Rolla wrote to Swami Sivananda. And Swami Sivananda's reply is remarkable. So he says in that reply, I'm paraphrasing, nothing in my life is worth mentioning except for I have met Sri Ramakrishna, I have served Sri Ramakrishna, and I have obtained his grace. And by his grace, I have seen God 3 times in his lifetime. So he is very clear that during Sri Ramakrishna's lifetime, he had 3 very intense spiritual experiences. And now, now meaning much later, of course, when he's writing to Roma Rolla, that now this body is only for singing the praise of Sri Ramakrishna. So, Swami Sivananda would say again and again and again that Sri Ramakrishna is the Tarak mantra for this age. Tarak mantra, I mean, the name Tarak is his name as well, but it also means crossing, Tarana. So, crossing this Bhavasagar. So, Sri Ramakrishna's name is the Tarak mantra for this age. He would say again and again. So then coming back to his time with Sri Ramakrishna, it so happens that his wife Nitya Kali dies within a few years of the marriage, and so now Tarak is kind of free. His responsibilities have been met, so he decides to become a full-time monk, become a monk. And it's very illustrative situation where he goes to his father, Ramkanai, and he explains his decision. And Ramkanai says, "Oh, you are so lucky. I also wanted to lead a life like this, but I couldn't for a variety of reasons. So may you go ahead and be successful in your spiritual life." So that, you can imagine, was a big confidence, source of confidence for Swami Sivananda. Then, as we know from Sri Ramakrishna Paramhamsa's biography, this is mid-1880s. The first signs of cancer of the throat appear. They take him first, I mean, they bring him from Dakshineshwar to Calcutta. They first bring him to Shampukur and then to Kashipur. And Tarok was with Sri Ramakrishna all this time. And it was when Sri Ramakrishna was in Kashipur, one day, Naren, Kali, Swami Abhedananda, Naren, Kali and Tarok, they decide to go to Gaya, Bodh Gaya. Bodh Gaya, as you know, is the place where the Buddha attained enlightenment. So it's a very famous pilgrimage place. So they go to Bodh Gaya and they sit down in meditation, and Swami Vivekananda, Naren, he sees kind of a light emanating from perhaps Buddha and becoming more intense and entering Tarak's body. So as you can imagine, Naren was very, very impressed. He goes and embraces Tarok. And some people say that perhaps that is why Naren used to call Tarok Mahapurush. Versions differ, but most of the people would say it was because of what I just said earlier about his marriage with Nitya Kali, his unique kind of marriage. So now the time has come, 1886, Sri Ramakrishna attains Maha Samadhi, and now, as you know, when Sri Ramakrishna left his mortal frame, then that Kashipur house was no longer available. I mean, it was a rented house. It was a big house. It had a substantial rent which was paid by the devotees. They stopped paying the rent. So these would-be monks had no place to go. As we know, what happened is that Sri Ramakrishna appeared to Suren. Suren was another householder. So Sri Ramakrishna appeared to Suren and said, "See, my kids are kind of homeless now." And so then Suren comes to Naren, and they decide to rent a house. That's the first monastery, what is known as the Boranogor monastery. So when that Boranogor house was rented, the first 3 people to move into that house were Tarok and Latu and Budo Gopal. And then, of course, slowly others started coming in, and the austerities that they performed in that house, it was a haunted house, um, full of snakes and scorpions. It's a terrible, terrible place. But these monks, or would-be monks at that time, they cared less. I mean, when we read about their life, it's so, so inspiring. And but and of course, all of these were highly evolved spiritual souls. But even among them, Tarok had a special stature. How so? Let's take one example. Swami Trigunatitananda, Sharoda. So Sharoda had this vow. Now he takes a vow that just like Buddha, we know from Buddha that Buddha took this vow that I am now going to sit under this Bodhi tree, and come what may, I am not going to budge until I get enlightenment. So Swami Trigunatitananda takes a similar kind of vow, that I am not going to have anything to eat, drink, or anything like that until I get enlightenment. Now, this is great, but as you can imagine, it has some practical problems now. Now, this guy, how would he survive? So they try to convince him. See, I mean, and ultimately they come to a compromise. What is the compromise? Sharoda says that when you feed me, I will touch Tarokda. I mean, because he was much senior to the others. In Bengali, we call a senior person Da. So they used to all call him Tarokda. So when you feed me, I will touch Tarokda. That way, my vow will be still okay. And then, as with all these monks, they traveled a lot throughout many, many pilgrimage places in India. Now they have gone through that Antpur, as you know, Antpur, Swami Premananda's house. That's where they take these monastic vows, Christmas Eve. And so once he took his monastic vow, he became Swami Sivananda. So now Swami Sivananda, he travels around India, many places. He loved the Himalayas. He would go to Himalayas often. And in the Himalayas, what we say is Char Dham, 4 very famous pilgrimage places, Kedarnath, Badrinath, so forth and so on. So he went to all of them. And then he kind of made Almora. Almora is again high altitude. He kind of made Almora his base. He loved being in Almora, and he spent a lot of time there. And that's where he met E.T. Sturdy. As we know from Swami Vivekananda's biography, E.T. Sturdy was very much impressed by Swami Vivekananda, and he helped Swami Vivekananda establish the England side of the Vedanta Center. But later, I don't know why, there was some friction, some souring of relationship between Vivekananda and E.T. Sturdy. We see these letters from Swamiji, which are where we find Swamiji was very pained because E.T. Sturdy made some accusations. But anyway, let's not digress. All I'm trying to say is E.T. Sturdy, he first met Swami Sivananda, in fact, before he met Swami Vivekananda. So, Char Dham, Almora, Prayag, Allahabad, Omkareshwar, Shiva in Madhya Pradesh, many other places. And we fast forward to 1897. As you know, Swamiji now, he returns from the West. So he comes to Colombo first. As you know, we have this famous book, Lectures from Colombo to Almora. So Swamiji lands in Colombo, and then Shivananda, he meets Swami Vivekananda in Madurai. Madurai is in Tamil Nadu, pretty much southern tip, you can say, of the Indian subcontinent. So then they go together to Calcutta, and as you can imagine, when Swamiji returns to Calcutta, he is given a lavish reception. But Swamiji sends Shivananda to Sri Lanka, and in those days it's called Ceylon, to preach Vedanta. So Swami Sivanandas stayed in Sri Lanka for about 10 months, preaching Vedanta. And it's very interesting, he met a devotee, Mrs. Pickett. And Mrs. Pickett, after she was in the company of Swami Shivananda, she went back to Australia and New Zealand to found the Vedanta movement there. I mean, when we look at the Vedanta centers in Australia today, pretty much they started with Swami Ranganathananda. When he would go for his lectures, he would, that's how the core group formed. But we are talking of Mrs. Pickett much, much before. So, and interestingly, Swami Ranganathananda is a disciple of Swami Sivananda. So then we come to 1902. It so happened that in the kind of kingdoms around Varanasi, there is a kingdom called Bhinga. So the Raja of Bhinga, he wanted to give some money to Swami Vivekananda to start a ashram in Varanasi. So Swamiji initially was a little reluctant, but then he took the money, and then he asked his brother disciples to go to and set up this in Varanasi, and many of them, they refused. So finally, Swamiji came to Swami Shivananda, and he said, and Shivananda also was a little reluctant, but then Swamiji became very emotional, and he said, well, I have already taken this money, do you want me to be a liar? And so the Swami Shivananda had no other option now, and he goes in late June of 1902, and you can say versions differ, but more or less around the 2nd, 3rd or 4th of July 1902, the ashrama is kind of up and running. And as we know, 4th July 1902 is the day Swami Vivekananda left this physical body. So when Swami Shivananda heard that news, he took a picture of Swami Vivekananda and put it in the shrine next to Sri Ramakrishna. And that is perhaps the first time that Swami Vivekananda's picture started to be put in the Ramakrishna centers. And he stayed there for about 7 years, and his tenure there was remarkable. I mean, he would not move out of the ashram. He was there, was in the ashram all the time, meditation, chanting, ritual worship, giving classes. So much so that, of course, this money, Raja Bhinga gave 500 rupees. It was a big amount in those days, but still, I mean, the money started to run out, and Swami Sardananda, who was the general secretary of the mission, he came to Varanasi and he said, Karokda, I mean, try to do a little bit of fundraising, but Swami Shivananda had absolutely no interest in all that. The image that we typically associate with Swami Shivananda is very reserved, indrawn, spoke very little, but he had a heart of gold. And let me just give you one quick story. So this is the story of Brahmachari Rishi. Brahmachari Rishi was a brahmachari in the Varanasi ashram, and that, in those days, the ashram was a very small place. It had just 2 latrines. And one day, when Brahmachari Rishi had dysentery and he wanted to visit the latrine. He goes there and he finds both of them occupied, one of them by Swami Sivananda and another by another person. So he waits outside, but he has this cramp, and so he soils his cloth. Swami Sivananda comes out, and immediately on seeing Brahmachari Rishi, he knows what's happened. So he tells Brahmachari Rishi, go and clean up yourself, go and clean up yourself. So Brahmachari Rishi goes. When he comes back, he says, leave your soiled clothes here. And you can imagine Brahmachari is very embarrassed. And he says, no, Maharaj. He says, no, just do what I tell you. Leave your soiled clothes here and you go. And he himself, Swami Sivananda himself, cleans his soiled clothes. So you can imagine how much he loved his monks and brahmacharis. So now we come to the time when he was the vice president now, because it's 809. Let's just look at his tenure as the president of the order. As I said, he became the president in 1922. So his main contribution as president was this training of the monks. As you know, training is the most important pursuit that you can have, because those were the times when the movement was very nascent, and there were tremendous financial challenges, but still he did not compromise on the training. He was very strict in that sense, that and nothing escaped his eye. He had a hawk eye. He would go to the kitchen and find one thing not very correct, and he would point out. So very strict, but also, as we have seen before, very tender heart. So as I said about the training, we can see, because of this very strict training and because of this high exacting standards that were asked for from these brahmacharis, not all of them could make it. Some of them had to leave the ashram. So Swami Sivananda had this phrase which he would say, give him 2 paise. Give him 2 paise. I mean, paise is a unit of currency in India. Give him 2 paise basically meant give him the ferry fare to cross the Ganges. That means this person now had to leave the ashram. So he takes the ferry, crosses the Ganges, and then he's on his own. So he used to say, give him 2 paise. Then he changed it to give him 4 paise. What's the matter with 4 paise? He says, well, you see, we give him this ferry fare to cross the Ganges, but what if he wants to come back? So we should give him this chance. If he wants to come back, he has the money. Even though he was president of the order, he was very childlike. His behavior and his antics were just like a child. So let me give you some examples of that. Once it so happened that a thief entered the Belur Math. And the thief, he went, at that time Josephine MacLeod was staying there. He went to Josephine MacLeod's room and he stole a reliquary which had some antiques, including Swami Vivekananda's hair. So Josephine MacLeod, the moment she realized, she shouted. The Swamis downstairs, they heard her and they caught hold of this thief. And I'm pretty sure they gave him some thrashing as well before they brought him to Swami Sivananda. So Swami Sivananda, he listened to the whole story. Then he talked to Josephine MacLeod, and they both agreed that this is kind of a special kind of a thief, because who would want to take these antics of Swami Vivekananda? So once Swami Shivananda realized this, he said, okay. So he tells, I mean, these are the brother monks who gave him this thief a thrashing and brought him, the thief to him. He tells them, go to this room and bring a new piece of cloth. Can you imagine new piece of cloth? So they are, of course, very mad now. But anyway, they have to follow what the president says. So he then says, give this to the thief. And the thief now is wearing this new piece of cloth. He is going around the Belur Mutt without any compunction whatsoever. But that was Swami Sivananda. Another thief, he comes, he is also caught. So then Swami Sivananda says to the thief, why did you come to Belur Mutt to steal? You see, we have not much to give anyway. So the thief says, well, what could I do? I had no food for 2 days. Oh, you didn't have any food? Hey, he tells the attendant, bring him food, feeds him lavishly. Then he says, okay, now anytime you run short of food, come here. So that was Swami Shivananda. In those days, and even today, I believe, in Belur Mutt, a cobbler used to come, and this cobbler would sit under the mango tree, and he would mend shoes and all that, and he would be paid very paltry amount, but whatever it was. So in those days, the unit of currency was annas and rupees. So 16 annas made a rupee. So they would pay a few annas for every shoe mended. And from his veranda, for those of you who have visited Belur Mutt, the old building, from his veranda he would say, hey, why are you giving just anna? Give him a rupee. So very generous. A fisherman would catch some fish, bring them to Belur Mutt, and these monks would now want to haggle with him because, of course, we know Belur Mutt also had tremendous financial challenges. But he, Swami Shivananda that is, would say, oh, no, just give him whatever he asks for. Don't haggle with him. So very generous-hearted in that sense. And he also had some what we call precognition and prescience. His mind was so spiritually evolved, he could foresee things. Let me give you a couple of examples. So in the Varanasi ashram, there was a hospital, there still is. And in this hospital, there was a young Swami, a disciple of Swami Shivananda, who used to take care of the pathological tests in the lab. He was a lab attendant. So the in-charge Swami of Varanasi ashram thought that this boy, this young monk, if he goes to Calcutta and gets training in pathological testing, he would be of much more help. And so there was a doctor in Calcutta, a very close devotee of the Ramakrishna mission, so they made this arrangement. So the in-charge Swami sent this Swami to Calcutta. So he comes to Belur Mutt, salutes Swami Shivananda. So Swami Shivananda says, well, what has brought you here? He says, see, my in-charge Swami asked me to go to this doctor in Calcutta and get training for about a couple of months. Then I can go back to Varanasi and be of more help in running the hospital. So Swami Shivananda doesn't say anything. So this Swami goes, takes training for 2 months, comes, and now the time has come for him to return to Varanasi. So he comes again to meet Swami Shivananda. He salutes Swami Shivananda. Swami Shivananda says, so what brought you here? He says, Maharaj, as I told you, I came 2 months ago from Varanasi to get this training. Now I am going back to Varanasi and I will be of more help in the pathological lab testing. He says, will you go back to the lab? Will you go back to the lab? 2-3 times he just mentions this. So this Swami says, maybe Maharaj's memory is failing, or so he comes back to Varanasi. And you know what? The day he lands in Varanasi, he is told that the pujari of the Varanasi center, that pujari passed away. So there is nobody else but this person who has to do the puja from now on. And so forget about lab training and all, forget about pathological tests. This Swami Vishwarupananda, he became the pujari, and he was the pujari for the next 25 years. A very renowned Swami of the order, but precognition. Same kind with Pravrajika Bharti Prana. Pravrajika Bharti Prana, again, an illustrious soul. When you read her biography, it's so impressive. She was a child. I mean, she was in the school, Nivedita school, and she nursed Holy Mother. She was not at that time a trained nurse, but close to, you can say, a trained nurse. So when Holy Mother passed away, Swami Sardananda then decided that perhaps Sorella, that was her pre-monastic name, perhaps Sorella can get some more training and then go to Varanasi. There is a old age home for women, and she's almost a trained nurse, so she can then help with this Varanasi ashram. So Sorella comes to Swami Sivananda to ask for his blessings. Swami Sivananda says, so she says, well, I'm going to Varanasi for this old age home. He says, no. Your work is over. He repeats, your work is over. You just, even if you go to Varanasi, just rent a hut and meditate. Your work is over. So Sorella then mentions it to Swami Sardananda, and then Swami Sardananda says, of course, if Mahapurush Maharaja said it, that's what exactly happens. She lives in total seclusion for close to 30 years. And when the Sarda Math was formed in 1953, she was one of the first ones to kind of join the order. And in 1959, I believe, she becomes the first president. I mean, so again, precognition. And not only was he able to foresee things, even when he made a mistake, things turned out. Let me give you a story. So this is about the Bangalore ashram. In the Bangalore ashram, a certain Swami founded the ashram, and the ashram grew. And then this Swami had this idea that I built this ashram, it belongs to me. And of course, you can imagine that this creates a huge problem, because there is, in India, an ashram doesn't belong to a person, it belongs to the order. So the trustees and all, they bring this to the notice of Mahapurush Maharaj, that this Swami is telling disciples that this is his ashram, and that has created a lot of problems. So Swami Mahapurush Maharaj writes a letter to this Bangalore Swami. He says, why are you creating all this trouble? The ashram belongs to the order. You leave at once, go back to your home. He sends this letter. And upon receiving the letter, that Swami in Bangalore, he obliges. He just leaves the ashram. But Swami Sardananda, who was the general secretary, he comes to Mahapurush Maharaj and says, what did you do? This, I mean, our structure is such that these kinds of things, the general secretary deals with it. You as the president should not deal with it. He says, oh, did I make a mistake? Okay, I can withdraw the letter. So Swami Sardananda said, no need to withdraw the letter. Whatever has happened has happened. And then this issue comes up before the court. Now, when it comes up to the court, the judge, he asks, well, how can you prove that this ashram belongs to the order? This Swami claims that he founded it, he built it, he grew it. So then they say, well, this is the proof, this letter, that this letter written by Mahapurush Maharaj to this Swami, the Swami complies and he leaves the ashram. So what more can be done? And so the judge says, yes, because that person himself followed, so we can so even this mistake, talk about Mahapurush Maharaj until we talk about his two dogs. He had two dogs, Kelo and Bhulo, and these two dogs were his prized possession. They used to stay in the Belur Mutt. In India, even today, the dogs, they don't really enter the building. They kind of stay in the courtyard. But they were very dear to him, and he would tell other people, you see, these two, I am their master. And pointing to Sri Ramakrishna, he would say, he is my master. And he would say in Hindi, Guru ke darbar mein kutte ke mafik pade rehna. That means in the courtyard in the steps of the Guru's place, just be like a dog. And he loved these two dogs so much. He would throw these pieces of biscuit and bread from his veranda, and these dogs would jump up to grab, and he would like it very much. And these dogs, and he had given strict instructions to kind of feed the dogs and maintain the dogs, so much so that brahmachari, he said to his fellow brahmachari, maybe in our next birth, we can become one of these dogs. That way we'll have a better life. There was a brahmachari Tara Prasanna. Brahmachari Tara Prasanna's one of the main jobs was to take these two dogs out for a swim. As you know, we saw in Abhijit's slides last week, the Ganges in Belur, near Belur Mutt, is very wide, about a mile. So Brahmachari Tara Prasanna would take these dogs out for a swim. And when he would return, his first thing he had to do was to go to Mahapurush Maharaj and report how far these dogs swam, how was their mood, etc., etc. So, so much so that this brahmachari, Tara Prasanna, he got sannyasa 2 years ahead of schedule. Typically, as you know, it takes about 9 years from the time you enter the monastery to becoming a Swami. In Tara Prasanna's case, he got it 2 years early, just because he took so much good care of Mahapurush Maharaj's dogs. But now we come towards the end of Mahapurush Maharaj's life. He suffered a stroke, and that stroke paralyzed him, one side of him, and he couldn't talk. He could only tell by gestures. But he had said, before he had this stroke, he had said that even if you cut off my tongue, I will keep repeating the name of Sri Ramakrishna. And after paralysis, after the stroke, people, when they saw his face beaming with joy. And I will just read a couple of paragraphs of his last days. So this is 1934. On 25th April, Shivananda initiated 3 devotees. Compared to other days, he was feeling better. At 11 a.m., he had his lunch. While drinking a little buttermilk after his meal, his right hand suddenly began to tremble, and he put his cup down. A stroke of apoplexy paralyzed his right side, and his speech became impaired. He tried to say something to his attendant but failed. Immediately, the attendant called other Swamis and helped Shivananda lie down on the bed. At once, word was sent to Calcutta for expert medical help, and several doctors hurried to the monastery. All effort was made to provide the best medical care, and several doctors attended Shivananda daily. But they couldn't really do much. He lived in this state of paralysis and stroke for about 9 months. But, but I'll just give you one couple of things. When you saw his face, this is the next paragraph. I'm kind of skipping some passages. Looking at Shivananda's serene and joyful face, Pandit Pramathanath Tarkabhushan, an authority on the Hindu scriptures, remarked, I have read in books about Jivan Muktas or illumined souls. Today, I have seen one face to face in the flesh. The Swami seemed to be in deep samadhi all the time, once in a while coming down to the normal plane. I am indeed very much blessed in meeting this supreme yogi. And just to give you one more example, Swami Hiranmayananda, a disciple of Mahapurush Maharaj, he hailed from Malda. Malda is a district in West Bengal. And so Mahapurush Maharaj used to call him Malda. So whenever he would come to meet Mahapurush Maharaj, he would say, oh, Malda, Malda. So now Shivananda has this stroke, he cannot speak. So Hiranmayananda Maharaj comes to meet him, and Hiranmayananda is wondering, would Maharaj recognize me? Because he didn't meet very often. So the moment he enters Mahapurush Maharaj's room, with great difficulty, Mahapurush Maharaj uttered just one name, Malda. So even though he was afflicted with stroke and paralysis, his brain was perfectly, his memory perfectly sharp. So now we come to the last few days. On 3rd February 1934, 9 months after the stroke, Shivananda developed pneumonia. His condition slowly deteriorated. Several eminent doctors struggled to keep this great soul alive. Swami Sivananda lived to see Sri Ramakrishna's birth anniversary on 15th February and the public festival on Sunday, 18th February. He passed away at 5:36 p.m. on Tuesday, February 20th, 1934. At the final moment, Shivananda's face beamed with joy, and the hair of his head stood on, both considered to be auspicious signs. The monks chanted Shankara's 6 stanzas on Nirvana, Pushpadanta's Shiva Mahimna Stotram, the Upanishads and the Gita. Abhedananda came and offered flowers at the feet of Shivananda and recited a line from the Bhagavat. According to the traditional custom, Shivananda's body was bathed with Ganges water, decorated with flowers and sandal paste, and then consigned to the flames of the funeral pyre on the bank of the Ganges. Hundreds of monks and devotees solemnly repeated, "Glory be unto Sri Ramakrishna." So we pray to Swami Sivananda to help us in our spiritual endeavor, and we are certain that through his grace, which he showered upon so many, we will also make progress in our spiritual life. I thank you, and I thank you, Maharaj, for giving me this opportunity. So we will meditate for 30 seconds, and then if you have any questions. Questions?
Swami Premananda's life, I remember I have read the incident that you mentioned, that he would, if he would get very upset with some newcomer, he would give 2 paisa, and then the person would get really very sad. Now I have to go
That's right. That's right.
So is it a continued tradition?
I don't know, Maharaj, continued or not.
What you mentioned was in Varanasi, not in Vellore.
No, this was in Belur Math. This was in Belur Math, yeah.
You mentioned Shivanandaji met Study in Almora.
Yes.
What was Mr. Study? Was he like a spiritual?
He was with this theosophy movement, theosophist. Yes, yes.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you very much.
Thank you, Maharaj.
And next Tuesday we look forward to hearing about Swami Sardananda.
Yes, so next Tuesday it will be Swami Sardananda, and this Friday, stories from the Bhagavatam from Srikant. Thank you.
Sunday before that, Tuesday you will be speaking on law of karma.
Yes, so Sunday it will be on, yeah,